Sam Amick of The Athletic reports the Washington Wizards among a couple of teams interested in a possible trade package for forward Domantas Sabonis. Is there anything actually there should the Wizards be interested going forward? Greg Finberg helps us break that down today.
You are Locked On Wizards, your daily Washington Wizards podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
DC family, you are locked on to the Washington Wizards, where you're part of our family. We thank you for making Locked On Wizards your first listen every single day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Alongside the DC Sports content creating savant Abdullah Ayubi, I'm Ben Strober, and I cover the Washington Wizards for Roundtable IO. Today we're joined by our pal from Bullets Forever, Greg Finberg, also the host of the Wizards podcast. Greg, tough ending to last night's game. A lot of positives that we could tackle in a normal episode today, but with the recent news, Sam Amick reporting from The Athletic, the Wizards among three teams potentially interested in a trade for the forward from Sacramento, Domantas Sabonis. I want to get your initial thoughts on, is there actually anything there?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like smokescreen season now. Like, it's not even trade season because the deadline's not till mid-February, basically 2 months away. I think December 15th is kind of like when a guy is newly signed, then that lifts that kind of period where they can't get traded. So for the 15th on, it kind of unofficially starts trade season. So you'll start to see a lot of these rumors. The thing with Sabonis is he's only played 11 games this season. He's a really solid player, and when Sacramento was playing really well with Fox and they made the playoffs as the 2 seed, he was kind of the driving force on that team, but has been a little injured this season. 11 games played, 17 points, 12 rebounds, 50% from the field. He's a good player. Is he what the Wizards currently need? Like, not really. It's not someone I really would have had on their radar. But it seems like Sam thinks that that's a possibility. He's 29 years old. So again, would be the one of the oldest players. I think probably the oldest behind Anthony Gill on this current roster, behind Gill and Middleton and McCollum, which is fascinating. In terms of like the trade, I'm sure we'll break this down later. Like he's due a lot of money, and it's not just like a McCollum thing where it's a 1-year rental sort of where you're getting off a future contract and pool to be able to move on. The Wizards would kind of be taking a step back because not only is Sabonis owed $42 million this year, he's owed $45 million next year and $48 million the following year before he's an unrestricted free agent. So it's this year and 2 additional years that you're guaranteed locked into his contract. Is that something the Wizards want to do when they have Sarr? Bagley's been a really good backup option. He's been way more available than Sabonis this season, and he's on a veteran minimum contract. And the Wizards have Tristan Vukcevic. I'm sure they'd like to continue his development. So there's a lot of reasons why this doesn't make the most sense. I mean, breaking it down with the cap space, like the Wizards are going to have nearly $100 million next year. I've seen a lot of people saying they're going to go out and maybe get a big name free agent. It's probably going to be way harder than that because of just the history of not being able to attract these big names to DC. So maybe they want to do that in a trade. Maybe, if I'm putting my like hat on and seeing what Sam's trying to say with this, maybe he's considering that fact that the Wizards would like to trade for a good player like Sabonis rather than sign someone for that amount of money. Maybe that makes sense. But it's definitely an interesting dynamic to explore.
Yeah, that's really a lot of money, Greg, when you bring it up. I was a big fan of Sabonis when he was in Indiana, and I wanted the Wizards at the time. There was rumors, I think it was Tommy Shepard at the time, saying that the Wizards might trade for him at the deadline. And you bring up the injuries that he's been affected with this season, and that's a good point, Ben. Greg, sorry, both of you guys. This season, this team's already been hit by the injury bug. I mean, 4 or 5 players on the injury report, so there is some risk there. But if we look at Domantas Sabonis, double machine, averaging 17 and 12 when he's playing this year, what do you think that will look like with the front court with him and Alex Sarr?
I actually don't think it would look too bad. Like I mean, Saar is kind of your rim protecting big, and Sabonis has shown like an ability at times to make the three, but he's 20% this season. It's not like that's the shot I want from him versus Saar, who's definitely showed the ability to make it from the outside. So they're two very different centers, and especially now, like we're seeing a lot of these two big lineups. The Thunder were able to do it as they won a ring last year. It's definitely something that can be successful in the league. Where Sabonis is sort of a guy that I think that he's best when he has the ball in his hands. Like the Kings use him as like a Jokic type hub at the top of the key, where he's able to catch the ball off these pick and rolls, and he's able to find guys on backdoors, or he's able to, get dribble handoffs. And he's kind of what makes their offense go when he's at his best. Do the Wizards want to bring someone like that in and sort of put Saar way more off ball, where maybe, Saar won't be facilitating these actions and these screens like we've seen him this year, because that's kind of where Sabonis excels. Like there's no point in trading for Sabonis if you're not going to make him a focal point of your offense. So like, I think it could work just because they're not the same big. They're pretty different. But like there's way better ways to spend $45+ million every year. It's a different case if Sacramento is paying you handsomely to take on the contract, which like they kind of need to at this point. I think they have, were they 6-18, 6-19 on the season. They're terrible. They have Levine, who's a disgruntled asset, making a lot of money. Same goes for Sabonis, DeRozan. They're going to have to pay a team to take his contract off their hands. And if that team's the Wizards, if you're the Kings and you offer the Wizards like a protected first-round pick to take him, that's not enticing enough. Just because, like, if you're the Wizards, maybe you mentioned the fit, you don't know what the fit's going to be. And if you're the Wizards, you're like, I like what I have with Sarr, and I like what I have with my young core. Why would I insert a guy who's nearly 30 and is making around 45 to 50 million for the next 2 seasons when I can just as easily use that money to extend my players? Local Bali has had an okay up and down injury plague season, but he's up for an extension. Cam Whitmore is up for an extension. That's not going as well as probably the Wizards thought, but he's also up for an extension. And eventually you'll have to extend guys like Sarr, Keyshawn, Bub. They'll all be in the same year. Trey Johnson will be coming up if they all play well. And I just think there's better ways to spend the money, especially because you don't know what that fit will be.
So there's one thing that's interesting, and I think this is why there's the rationale for Sam to say the Wizards might still have interest, even though, as AB mentioned, the previous interest that Sam actually does report that it was previous interest from back when he was dealt part of the Tyrese Halliburton trade. I mean, what a crazy trade that is at this point, and how that's changed the landscape of the NBA, if you're looking back on it from that perspective. But Will Dawkins was part of the front office in Oklahoma City when Sabonis was drafted back in 2016. So that's perhaps the rationale that we see there coming for this trade. But one reason, Greg, that I'm personally out on making a move like this at the deadline in terms of like finding a fit, because one, if you're taking on Sabonis right now, you, as you mentioned, are agreeing to probably the worst contract in the NBA right now, and you're going to deal with that for multiple seasons. So you're basically saying, like, put your eggs into one basket here. Like, we hope Sabonis can fit well with Sarr, and maybe that'll take us to a contending level next year. But if you're the Wizards, you're losing all of these games for a reason. You're trying to pick in the top 3 of this draft, so you have the ability to pick the best player available, whether it's an AJ Damontas or a Cam Boozer. If you get a Cam Boozer in this draft and you want him to slot in at the 4 next to Alex Sarr, then what would the point of having Sabonis be? I think the Wizards should make a move like this to supplement it for competing purposes in the summer, because I think the Wizards need to find out who they're drafting within the organization to really discover who's going to be the best fit. Because if you get a guy like Damontas or Boozer in this draft, then maybe your biggest glaring need is still a point guard. Then the Wizards could maybe go out and make a trade for an available point guard in the market in that case, and then maybe you see them take the next step that way. I don't know if it makes much sense for the Wizards to move without the foresight and make this type of move at the deadline. I don't really see that being a possibility. I think it's more important to wait and see what the most available or what the best fit's going to be going forward after the draft. I want to get your thoughts on that.
I think it's an excellent point, actually, because like, let's say they get the first pick, and right now it seems like that's Boozer out of Duke. It would make sense for the Wizards to draft him, and then if you had made the Sabonis trade in the season, it's like, well, you have Sarr and Boozer and Sabonis, and you have a really loaded front court. that's not ideal when you could have just saved $45 million taking Boozer, and now you have a perfect complement to Saar. And the same thing goes if you get the third pick and you get Darren Peterson, you have your point guard. It's like, okay, maybe we can go out and make a move like that now if we want, because we have cap space the next 2 years. We can afford to pay a guy like Sabonis because these extensions won't kick in for 2 years. Let's use that cap space now and see if that can work. That's actually a really good point. And I think they'd be smart to do it. Like if you're going to take on a bad contract that's expiring at the deadline, like they did with like they've done in past years, and they sort of did it this year with McCollum this offseason, and then Middleton at the deadline last year, where it was like, we're understanding that this is going to be just 1 year of them on contract for the next year, and then they're done. So if the Wizards get another opportunity to do that at the deadline, sure, if you know that they're not going to be here for the long term. But I think you make a good point in terms of like, let's not, get too far ahead of ourselves. Like there's no rush here. You're rebuilding for a reason. And the same thing you mentioned, another good point of that is the losses. Like if you play Sabonis, he's a great player. You're going to win a lot more games. And if that's the case, then you're going to be close to maybe losing out on that pick this year. As we've seen, they're not going to let that happen. I think I saw today they're 3-20 for the third straight season through 23 games. Like they're really good at this tanking thing. So it would be fascinating to see if they did add Sabonis midseason, how he would affect that. But like you mentioned, man, you make a good point. There's really no reason to get ahead of yourself. Just wait and see where you are in the lottery.
Yeah, honestly, I think the Suns were one of the teams that were interested, so it probably makes more sense for them because I think the Suns think they're competing when I don't actually think they are. But if they're going to be like the Wizards for a long time before the new front office came in, the Suns can go ahead and make that move, take on that contract, give up assets or whatever. Who cares? Let's take our first break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation here with Greg Finberg about Domantas Sabonis. Guys, it's 2025, almost 2026, and those days of waiting for someone to become a full-blown emergency before you see a doctor, they're over. No more walking it off for 6 months. No more pretending that weird shoulder stiffness is just sleeping on it wrong. It's time to take your health seriously, and ZocDoc makes that easier than ever. Because staying healthy is more than hitting the gym or eating right. It's about actually getting things checked out when something feels off. Using ZocDoc makes scheduling easier. Search for in-network doctors and book right in the app. Real appointment times are listed, including same-day visits. No more back-and-forth phone calls or waiting weeks to be seen. Super helpful for routine checkups and those little issues you've been meaning to get checked out for a while. It lets you compare providers using real patient reviews and not ads. It makes everything simple to keep your health a priority, even when you have a busy schedule. I've used it to schedule appointments quickly when I didn't want to wait weeks, so it helps you stay on top of your health before something becomes a bigger problem. So stop putting off your doctor's appointments and get the care you need. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA.
When it comes to Greg, trading someone to acquire a guy like Sabonis right now, do you think McCollum is the most valuable trade asset on this team? Ben and I talk about how Corey Kispert, even though he's dealing with an injury right now, he's a guy who can go out there and be a really good shooter for a team that's trying to contend this season. But from CJ, we've seen the 20-plus point games, 40 points against Detroit. Do you think he's the most valuable asset right now in DC?
It's like fascinating because in terms of value, you got to kind of look at Sacramento. If this is the trade partner, I have no idea what they're doing. Like, I don't know if they're trying to like win games and salvage this season or if they're building towards the future. So I really don't know what they want in a trade and how much they value a guy like CJ. Because Sabonis is making so much money, it has to be one of McCollum or Middleton if it's a midseason trade. Because if it's in the offseason, I don't think the Wizards have the contracts to make a trade like this work. Just because everyone else on the team, I think, is making either a vet minimum or they're making a rookie contract, apart from Kispert, who's making like 13. So it's definitely weird with the contracts. But if you're making a midseason trade, it's got to be McCollum or Middleton, I would assume, as the main piece. And CJ would make the most sense because he's more value. And I think he's definitely a better player and would be a better asset to Sacramento at this point of his career than Middleton, who's been dealing with knee injuries the last couple of years, is missing the back-to-backs with knee soreness this season. but both are expiring contracts. So maybe the Kings, I think the main incentive for them would just be to get off the contract. So I don't think it would necessarily matter which one, but you would have to attach someone else just going in the trade machine. It seems like the 34 million that both of them are making won't be enough. So you can attach a guy like Branham who's making nearly $5 million, and that would work. And then if you're the Wizards, you got to say, well, I'm not taking back this contract for nothing. In the Kings, if they're trying to rebuild, I don't know if it would be prudent for them to attach draft capital. I don't think second round picks would be enough for the Wizards if you're making this move. So give a first, and maybe you can kind of discuss from there. If you're getting paid to take on Sabonis, who's a good player when he's healthy, and you think the fit can work, that's really the only way I'd consider it. But it depends what the Kings want. I don't know what they want. I don't know what they're trying to do. But if a trade was going to be made, McCollum or Middleton, I think, would have to be featured in it. It just depends what they want.
I just don't imagine a possibility where this trade really works for either party, because as you said, it's kind of unclear what the Kings are really doing. I think they want to enter a rebuild. If I were the Kings, I would tear that whole thing down immediately and start a full rebuild the way the Wizards have. Now, the problem with that you run into is trading off that contract. Like, what are you going to be able to get in return? I guess maybe the Wizards were in a similar situation at one point with Beal, because I couldn't have even imagined a possibility that where they'd be able to trade off Beal's contract. And it took like a bunch of loopholes and swaps and a whole bunch of nonsense to like even get that deal done. Like, wasn't it like a 3-team trade or something like that? There's way too many details to even like remember off the top of your head. But I feel like it doesn't even make sense, because if you're going to give up Sabonis, if you're Sacramento, you'd ideally do it because you want to acquire like draft capital and assets, and there's no chance the Wizards give up an unprotected first-round pick or like any valuable asset to get Sabonis in that trade. And then if you're the Wizards and you're absorbing this contract, you'd say like, hey, like, where's our assets in return? Like, we're taking on the worst contract in the NBA right now. Like, you guys need to give us a pick or something like that. So both parties would essentially just be at a crossroads saying like, wait a second, what the hell are we even doing here? Like, I don't think this trade can even work. So it's kind of just interesting that this idea has been thrown out there. And I don't even think Sam put it out there as like interest because it's a realistic possibility. I think genuinely like there is slight interest. I don't think that's a non-credible report at all. I think just given the history with Dawkins being part of the front office in Oklahoma City when he was drafted, then the previous interest beforehand, and maybe Sam has like the idea, or like based on other reporting, is that the Wizards plan on trying to contend a little more next year, so maybe he just thinks that's a guy that might fit in. Greg, there's one player right now that I'm trying to like gauge his trade interest, and maybe this is someone we see the Wizards go after at some point. And I don't want you to like even like, you don't need to give like a definitive answer like what a trade package would look like, but has anybody considered the idea of like De'Aaron Fox? Because what if the Spurs choose to move on from him?
Yeah, he's making a lot of money. He's very good. He's been their closer this year. I've seen a lot of people, when the Spurs play bad, it seems like he's their scapegoat. But when they play good, he doesn't get any of the credit. I think they'd be dumb to trade him just because like you're so young, and he's kind of like a veteran that is your point guard that steadies the ship. Now, don't get me wrong, Dylan Harper is a fascinating watch. His ability to get to the rim at his age and his experience is awesome. It's crazy that the Spurs. I saw a poll that was like had the Spurs as like a top 5 front office the last couple of years. Like, if you gave me any of the picks, I would have made the exact same picks the last couple of years. Like, yeah, I'm taking Wemby and I'm taking Castle and I'm taking Harper. Like, it's just whoever fell in their lap. They got very lucky the last 3 years to be able to get top 3 picks every single year. That's rare. But if I'm them and they want to trade him, maybe the Wizards entertain it. He's definitely making a lot of money. I think he's 5 years at around 37 a year starting in 2025, and then it goes up pretty much every year. I think in 2029 he's making a lot of money. Like, he's under contract, Fox is, but the Wizards need a point guard. I don't know if you're the Wizards if you're going to go for that route, because they seem like they're pretty content with the development route, and then maybe if they feel like there's an opportunity to strike and get someone to insert, then sure. But if you're getting Fox, what does that say about your confidence in Bub, who had a season high 27 the other night? You could go like you mentioned, Ben, with why are you making a move now when you should see what you're going to get in the draft? What if you get to the draft and you get Darren Peterson with whatever pick you get? Then you have Fox who's making all this money, and now you're in the same situation the Spurs were just in, where you have a guy making a lot of money in Fox. He's the better player, but you have this young point guard that you kind of want to give runway to. So, like, it seems like the consensus from this pod and from you, Ben, is like, don't make a crazy move at the deadline. Maybe wait, and you have all that cap space in the offseason. You'll get off Middleton. You'll get off CJ. Then if you want to take on more money after the draft, by all means, you're going to try to compete next year. You should try to make some trades and use that money to do so. But at the deadline, maybe not do that. Like if you're trading CJ and a contender's like, yeah, I'll take him on. We're going to give you a guy that has another year of his contract next year because we don't want to pay it, like they did with Marcus Smart and the Grizzlies last year. We'll do that, but we're going to also attach like 4 second-round picks, or we're going to go ahead and attach this like top 10 protected first-round pick this year. That's a good trade that I think the Wizards should look into to use that cap space. And then you can still compete with the roster you have. Hopefully they develop, and you're still getting these draft assets. Like if you want to make a move in the offseason, you can. So I think the consensus from us here is just kind of like play it a little bit slow. You have all this money. You probably shouldn't make too big of a move now. And Fox, I think I can get behind a lot more than I can get behind a Sabonis, just because where they're at in their career, talent-wise, contract-wise. But like you mentioned, Ben, probably not the best decision to do at the deadline.
Yeah, you stick to the original plan, which is let's tank and bank on hopefully landing Darren Peterson. I also think, guys, it's crazy, at least now in the future, seeing what the Clippers are dealing with and the Pelicans, even though Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen are ballers, the idea of trading an unprotected first-round pick, it's just so scary to think about. And I'm so happy the Wizards aren't in that predicament.
It's the best way to put it. All right, so consensus from the Locked On Wizards pod, and then I guess the Wizards podcast as well, because Greg Finberg is part of us today, is I don't think there's real smoke or fire, to be frank with it, about this Domantas Sabonis trade. I think we're all pretty consensus out on it. But Greg, we appreciate you coming on and dropping the insight going forward.
Thanks as always, Ben. Appreciate you, AB. I had Ben on my pod the other day. I try to get AB on, but we'll get AB on at some point in the near future. But yeah, always appreciate you guys having me on.
Let's do it, man. Appreciate it. All right, everyone, that is Greg Finberg from Bullets Forever. That'll do it for this bonus content here on the Locked On Wizards podcast. We thank you for making Locked On Wizards your first listen every single day. For your second, check out the Locked On NBA Fantasy Basketball podcast, hosted by Josh Lloyd. Everybody, have a good weekend. Enjoy your time. For my co-host, Abdullah Ayubi, I'm Ben Strober, DC family. We'll talk to you later.